Hey, Cloudcast listeners. Before we get to today's show, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is Datadog. Now, you know we've been talking about Datadog for a while now. It's the monitoring platform for cloud-scale infrastructure and applications. But did you know that Datadog seamlessly integrates with your AWS environments? So you can start monitoring EC2, RDS, ECS, and all your other AWS services in minutes. You can visualize key metrics, set alerts to identify anomalies, and collaborate with your team to troubleshoot and fix issues fast. So if you want to figure out how Datadog can help your AWS environment, try it yourself for free by starting a free 14-day trial today. If you go to datadog.com/cloudcast, not only can you start your free 14-day trial, but you get a free Datadog t-shirt. So go out to datadog.com/cloudcast, sign up for your free 14-day trial, start monitoring your AWS environment, and get your free t-shirt. And now, on to the show.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. It's actually both of us for the intro this week. How you doing, Brian?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Yeah, we had one of those rare weeks where we were both in town, so we figured, not only were we both on for the guest, but we're actually going to do the news together this week as well. I think this is only a first, maybe second. I don't even know.
Yeah, hey, it's 2019. It's always good for new things. So yeah, it's good to talk about a little bit of news. It's been an interesting news year because it's like every week. A, there's some news, but B, that it seems to bounce around, which is sort of nice. It's not always the same thing year after year. So where would you like to start with the news?
Well, it seems like a little bit of Google news this week. Google's kind of getting into the hybrid cloud platform game. They're kind of doing a beta of the Google platform. What is the best way to approach this or think about this, Brian?
At Next, they announced what they called GKE on-prem. So they took the same approach that a number of the big cloud providers are, which is we're going to try and emulate some of our public cloud services on some hardware and software in the customer's data center. It looks like, especially now with the new CEO being there, they're trying to expedite this. Originally, it was just going to be Kubernetes and some of the things around Kubernetes. Now it looks like they're trying to expand that footprint just in terms of services, which I think everybody sort of expected. You can't just expect every one of your customers to run Kubernetes. So I think the interesting piece here is they're now hearing the new CEO talk about what's going on, and he's probably obviously telling them to expedite some of those services, move them out of alpha into beta.
Yeah, and along those same lines, in addition to that, he's kind of making some differences already. He pulled out his checkbook this week. So Google announced an intent to acquire Illuma. And the easiest way to think about this, and we'll have a link in the show notes, but it's all about cloud migrations. And that actually is a topic with our guest here coming up after the cloud news. But it's interesting to me that the two big areas they're pushing, that Thomas Kurian in particular is pushing isn't necessarily the services in the cloud. One of them is going for hybrid cloud and one of them is going for cloud migrations.
Yeah, no, it's like you like to say all the time. It's, shiny stuff is fun and cool, but you got to go follow the money. And a lot of times the money is in, boring legacy stuff and modernizing legacy stuff. So they're, Kurian is definitely going after business that he knows, which is, databases and stuff that's been around for a while and trying to move money from one vendor's pocket into their pocket.
Yep, absolutely. And thirdly, on cloud news, we actually have something not Google related, but it's been, as we've talked about, it's been a really good year for venture capital and funding rounds, probably actually better than we thought coming out of the gate. So Menlo, if I remember correctly, but VC firm just announced a $500 million investment fund. And think of it is the best way to do is it's almost like very reactive to, and they've said as much, SoftBank, reactive to SoftBank and the Vision Fund and these big funds that are investing in, millions to tens of millions to hundreds of millions of dollars. I find this really interesting because it's almost like this knee-jerk reaction or just reaction in general that we knew was going to come from SoftBank and SoftBank's big money pockets. It was just a matter of time until somebody reacted.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is we're learning, and this is just a maturity thing. You can get some of this if you listen to things like the A16Z podcast. I think we're seeing more and more at different stages of companies and different rounds of funding that VCs feel like they have enough experience that they're going to bring more than just money. And so we're seeing these VC funding and VC niches getting created at like early stage, second stage, third stage, fourth stage, like so forth. And I think that's what it is I think they feel like, okay, we know enough about this stage that we can make a difference, and maybe hopefully some of the other later stages get skipped and they get to IPO or acquisition faster.
Yep. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So listen, before we jump to our guests, because I think that wraps up our news for this week, we definitely got to thank our sponsor for this week's Cloud News of the Week. Aaron, do we know anybody migrating applications to the cloud?
It seems like it's happening every day these days, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. So want to thank this week's sponsor, Liquid Technology. Liquid Technology really helps companies in purchasing and decommissioning IT hardware. So if you want to get out of the IT hardware space, Liquid Technology is a great choice. They provide secure and offsite data destruction, offers fully compliant and green e-waste recycling solutions. And you know what? Their service is really easy to remember. It's called Cloud Last. So the last thing you're going to think about before you go to the cloud. So to learn more about Liquid Technology Cloud Last services, visit cloudlast.co/cloudcast. So they've got a great special giveaway for our listeners. If you register and while supplies last, you'll get a free Cloud Last t-shirt, and one lucky winner will receive a $100 Amazon gift card. So can't beat that. Definitely something if you're looking at migrating to the cloud, especially from the perspective of getting out of the hardware business. So Aaron, definitely something that I know our listeners are interested in, and thank you to Liquid Technology for sponsoring today's show. So let's get to our guests. We've got a great guest coming up, and we look forward to talking to the folks from Second Watch. And we're back, and as you know, folks, we're always trying to cover kind of insights as to not only what's going on trend wise, but also really trying to speak to some people who have great insight into what customers are doing. So Aaron, we've got some friends in the community who give us some insight sometimes. I know, we talk to folks about cost modeling, cloud, and other things in cloud, but today we're really excited. We're going to talk to some folks who have been around doing things in the cloud for quite a while and have just a tremendous amount of insight. So very, very excited to have Jeff Aden, who is founder, executive vice president at Second Watch. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks, Brian and Aaron. My name is Jeff Aden, and just to tell you a little bit more about Second Watch, founded Second Watch in 2010 during a very rough economy at the time that coming out of 2008, where we had started working with the cloud about 2008, and during that recession, had to find ways to expand our business and grow our business while spending less dollars, and we kind of stumbled on the cloud around 2000 with a bunch of marketing activities. And then that actually turned into a business idea and forming the business by 2010, and then up and running with venture capital in 2011. And really our thesis at the time was, companies will want to do more, faster, quicker. The cloud provided that avenue. And the benefit was you would save money and be able to reinvest those dollars to drive revenue and customer experience. And really that's held true ever since then. And I think as we looked back, in December and saw the stock market dip a little bit, I was reminding people, hey, our business model can survive any stock market turn. In fact, companies may even be more eager to save money after they see something like that, and also to attain more customers. So that's in short kind of how we got started. We really focus around large enterprise. So we help some of the largest brands around the world migrate and launch net new applications on the cloud, as well as provide the ongoing management for those. I'll just take a breath there and see if you have any questions on what we just talked about.
Yeah. So Jeff, this is Aaron. So we originally got to know Second Watch at one of the very first reInvent shows, and they had one of the largest booths on the show floor at the time, and they were also listed as one of the AWS, best partners. And if you go look today, Second Watch provides management tools, migration tools, system integration capabilities. And just as you had mentioned, there's a lot in the tool bag there, if you will. So how does Second Watch think of themselves today, and what kind of problems are they looking to solve today?
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the first reInvent. We were actually even at the first SKO, which Amazon's holding their SKO this week in Las Vegas. So we've been to every one of the SKOs and every one of the reInvents that they've had. And man, each has grown considerably. And largely that's where we've seen, a lot of progress in the market, but we're still seeing some basics. And by that, I mean, migrations are still driving a lot of the business. However, they're moving much quicker. So, the old saying used to be lift and shift, and now we're seeing 0-day migrations. So the day we start working, we're actually migrating applications. Customers are more comfortable with security, more comfortable with connectivity. They understand the gold standard, is to be able to move to AWS. We're still seeing a lot of that. Customers that are late adopters, need some primers on some of the older information. But we're also seeing customers start to look at next gen and being in a position where they can start to look at some next gen applications or tools or workloads in products and services. Some of those being containers, some of those being new database services, or even serverless. But I would say we're a long ways in early days still in those development areas. So companies have a long ways to go to get to the ideal state, if you would. And we're still seeing a mixed bag of use out there.
Yeah. As Aaron said, we've sort of seen Second Watch evolve quite a bit. Obviously, your customer demands evolve. What, the question, if we go back to say the 2010 days and so forth, Amazon was sort of looked at as, kind of more associated with things like shadow IT or lines of business that were going around IT and so forth. And obviously, we've seen that change. We've seen people, IT is leveraging it, but, the lines of business using it. I mean, do you find there are certain patterns or things for certain buyers within organizations that sort of fit in buckets now, as opposed to, it being thought of as confrontational? I mean, how do you guys think about, you approach a large company, are there IT things that you bring to them, but also things that you bring to the lines of business that are different, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up, because I've been fortunate to see Andy Jassy speak a number of times. And, if you go back into 2012, really was where the momentum started for AWS, and definitely selling and talking to the developers, DevOps, shadow IT. This year at reInvent, it jumped out at me, and I think others caught on down the road. But Andy was using the term builders. And they had started using this term last year, and I keyed in on it. But I don't think I heard him once say DevOps or the business units. He was definitely talking about builders. And they're trying to position, obviously, that, hey, it's not shadow IT, it's not central IT, it's not mode 1, it's not mode 2. We're all builders. We're trying to create something better. It's going to take a while for that to catch on, but that's definitely, a number of ways to articulate that. And it's always been kind of our approach, where we work with central IT and work with business units, regardless of what you call them, and try to show and explain to them how strategic both of those roles can become when they're working together. So no longer having to worry about if the lights are on. They're more worried about, or more thinking around how can they manage it with automation. And so we're seeing that shift of trying to bring those groups. Definitely has made a big progress with a lot of the early adopters, still a ways off from no silos. There's always politics involved. But we're definitely starting to see where companies are starting to think more as one versus silos. We're trying to get there at least.
And Jeff, twofold question, actually. One of them is kind of going back to that original, 2010, 2012 days. First part is did you ever envision this AWS ecosystem growing the way it did, especially around the number of services? Back in those days, it would have been probably 5 services on the dashboard, less than 10 services on the dashboard kind of thing, into the 100 plus approaching 200 services that we have these days. And if anything, what was like a really surprising trend that has happened over the last, 7 to 8 years or so?
Humbly, that's a difficult question to answer. We when we started out, our first deal, I think, was like $1,500. Way back in the day, and it was for probably some email migration. And as a startup, you try to find your ways, and I would say once we became a premier partner and saw the amount of people that Amazon was hiring and spent time around Amazon, I think there was less surprise about innovation, less surprise about the rate of growth. If you go back to when that CIA contract was started, and if you correlated that to investment firms, once the government bets on something, hold on, because it's going to move. And essentially that's what happened. And I would say kind of around that 2012, 2013, we're pretty confident we're really confident we were onto something. We had no idea that it would grow as quickly as it did, and that the deal sizes would get exponentially larger, that skill sets in the marketplace would continue to be tight for cloud services, and at the rate that it went. But I would say, the initial burst was probably, the most surprising. Since then, year after year, it's meeting or exceeding our expectations, which are pretty high.
Yeah.
I think for customers, now that being said, for customers, man, or even partners that are late to the party, what a tough spot to be in. Meaning somebody that, like myself and others that have been in this business, for 10 or 11 years, or close to 10 or 11 years, are very familiar with a lot of the things that we would consider basics, but might be, daunting to a newcomer. An example of that is recently I was talking to a customer who was a late adopter, and they were really trying to figure out, TCO comparison and ROI comparison to running something on-prem. And, it was a flashback because it was something we had to talk about in almost every meeting. And here I am years down the road speaking to a new adopter talking about it. And essentially they were taking the 5-year outlook of what storage requirements would be for this application and applying it to today's prices on the cloud. And essentially that formula doesn't work, because today you might start with zero amount of data, working your way up to, a couple terabytes of data or whatever it happens to be. Same thing with CPUs, et cetera. And so building a data center is not the comparison. Building a data center for 5 years from now is not the comparison to what you cost out in the cloud for what you're actually using today. And those things are starting to surprise me, that we're seeing them come back around, if you would.
One of the things that is always sort of publicly available, it's great now that we're seeing more and more of the cloud providers kind of break out their revenue numbers. It helps us have a sense of how big they are. Some of the big analyst firms will dig a little bit into the numbers, but, a lot of times we're still left wondering, what's really trending, what's real, what's sort of hype, what's being adopted, and so forth. I know our friends over at Cloudability do a really nice job of, kind of a state of the cloud report, and they sort of dug into things because they're very revenue centric. You guys wrote a really nice post at the end of 2018 that talked about, kind of mapping up what AWS says are their popular services and what your customers are using. So first and foremost, thanks for publishing that. It helps give us a sense of what's being used. The two things that sort of jumped out at me, the first was, the post mentioned that, some of the things you expect everybody's using, VPCs and S3 and EC2. Sure, everybody used that. I was sort of surprised. You guys mentioned that like nearly 100% of your customers are using DynamoDB. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about like what is it about that, which is really kind of a next generation database, attracts your customers, or what types of problems do they solve with that?
Yeah, so let me set the stage for that report so that it's clear on what it is. So we've been doing this for I think about 6 years, and what we do is we were doing it quarterly, but moved it to annually. Is we're taking a look at our customers and seeing what percentage are using which products. And as you mentioned, EC2, S3, some of these things are 100%. That's all customers are using those. The big headline from last year versus this year is, and again, this might not be in a full constant running state over 12 months. We're seeing more customers test, more customers launch POCs, look at cloud native application or workloads. And so we're seeing more of, what we call cloud native type tools, whether it be DynamoDB, Kubernetes, and using those either through, trying to test against others, or it's a cloud native, brand new application, or it's around automation and workloads. And really saw that as a bigger jump this last year than we did the year before. There were a number of things this year that were released at reInvent, that we will see towards the end of this year for our customers or the beginning of next year. And our customer base is, large enterprises, $1 billion or greater, right? So that's the population that we're looking at versus SMB type workloads. So it was interesting to see that more of our customers are looking at a broader tool set. Part of that may be that some of those customers we've worked with for many years. Others might be some of our packaged service offerings that we're releasing, or the ability for different groups to start to test other tools within their organization.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating to me, Jeff, is this kind of trend, like you had mentioned earlier. Some of the early days was a little bit more of this lift and shift mentality, and now you're starting to see more of the cloud native tools and services being used. And I really think this is, a combination of the changes in certainly your business model, but also changes in kind of education of customers and education of the industry of, okay, if I have this platform, what is the best way to use this platform? And they're just willing to, some of those applications have just reached a point where that lift and shift isn't necessarily working anymore. But that also, I kind of want to extend that point even one step further and say, with technologies like Outpost being announced, even though it's maybe not generally out there yet, but after so many years of AWS kind of have this idea of, hey, it's either cloud or it's legacy data center. And even Andy Jesse's keynotes over the years, like he used to not even talk about that. Then he kind of acknowledges it. Now he's kind of really gone all the way to we're having a product on it. So how do you see this impacting the thought process for customers or potential customers going forward?
Yeah, that there's a lot there to unpack. Obviously, I think a couple of things that I would say is that yes, there's been a fundamental shift in what, like you said, the actions and the behaviors of AWS, and I think it's just natural as they're the fastest growing and largest cloud technology provider, that they're looking and going to continue to look to ways to expand market share. Outpost is a great example of something that, is very interesting from a technology standpoint, along with the, partnership with VMware, because it really allows VMware, and I use the two kind of in combination, but it's more on a hybrid state. It opens up a huge customer base for AWS to market to and to get on the Kool-Aid, if you would. It also opens up the door for a lot of different use cases for, things that you could speculate about. So you have a bunch of these Outpost devices out there that also could or could not be running with VMware. What do you do with the unused capacity? Do all of a sudden you create a bunch of, opportunity and edge points out there, or different use cases that you could use the unused capacity out there? That's just one speculation. But it definitely creates, a broader use case for AWS outside of just moving to the cloud. That being said, going back to your comment around migrations, customers don't always just migrate a one for one. They're typically picking up some cloud native services, but the next generation that we're going to see is really around some of these new cloud services where a customer has migrated, maybe leveraged some things like RDS, et cetera, but now they're really ready to rewrite that application and they're looking at next gen services. And that's got a longer tail even than this migration phase that we've been in. And that's going to be really exciting, really innovative for customers to take part in. And
go ahead. And Jeff, a quick follow-up on that too. How do you envision this, this concept of up until now, you were learning services, but you were learning services that, have been hosted in AWS data centers, but now you have to, at some point go embrace this concept of Outpost and customer on-prem hardware. And let's be, honest for a second, all the nastiness that can go along with customers and data centers and how networking is configured and how things are run and all of the different ways you can, we've seen some very, Brian and I coming from infrastructure background, some very prescriptive ways to do that. And they often don't work in most people's data centers because they're almost like snowflakes, right? Everyone is just a little bit different. And is that something you just see as a train coming at you, or how do you look at something like that?
I don't see SecondWatch as a company getting into the actual data hardware. Where Outpost, their data center hardware, where Outpost is interesting, especially in a VMware environment, is being able to leverage that, which the VMware piece in and of itself solves some problems, around networking for like Oracle Raka as an example. So we see it as a potential way to broaden and quickly get customers onto the cloud. Not as, hey, there's going to be all this stuff behind it that's going to create more problems. Since we are so deep, often working with central IT, we're already migrating from those data centers and work with a lot of those. I wouldn't say oddities, but more the customization that they've done, and have created methodologies around tailoring that. So there are obviously challenges when you're dealing with large enterprises, but we see this as something that's going to streamline, the ability to move to the cloud quicker.
So let me ask you one last question here real quick. We talked a little bit about your customers becoming more comfortable with new technologies. Do you have a sense, have you seen anything over the last, say, 6 months where, there's sort of this interesting, magical new combination of something fairly new in terms of the technology stack and customers being like, oh, that's solving this sort of really interesting problem, or something where it's like, they were amazed that this new thing was able to solve something really quick. Have you seen anything like that, or are we still, new stuff you've got to spend a lot of time experimenting with?
Yeah. So the way I would phrase it is the analogy hasn't really changed, where, cloud technology is like a Ferrari, and if you put that in the hands of a 15-year-old, it's going to be scary. Same thing happens when they innovate with these new products. We still have a long way. I wouldn't say a long ways, because it's, we're still a ways off from companies being able to embrace fully these new technologies. That's not a bad thing. It's just part of the maturity. It creates a long tail for a business model for us and for Amazon. But 2020 and beyond, we're going to see more and more innovative things. And I think as people in the marketplace, whether it's Capital One, General Electric, or how Amazon, is looking at brick and mortar and grocery stores and innovating and checkouts, et cetera. I think we're going to see companies from a competitive standpoint increase not their gamble, but increase their investment in expediting customer experience and providing, a higher quality experience that's more reliable, easier to use. And we're going to see some great technology advances here in the next couple of years.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, listen, Aaron, I think we're going to wrap it up with that. Lots of really good insight this week. Jeff, thank you so much for being on. And, it's been great to sort of get a perspective from somebody who was there in the very early days and is now, really helping to help customers really change their business and deliver it in new ways. So thank you so much for being on. If folks want to, engage with Second Watch or kind of reach out to you folks, what's the easiest way to do that or to reach out to you?
Visit our website. We've got a number of ways to contact us on there at www.secondwatch.com. Really appreciate catching up with you guys again and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Very good. Well, for Jeff and for Aaron, thanks everybody for listening this week. We always appreciate it. We appreciate you telling a friend and rating the show on iTunes. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.